What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actresses walks onto a talk show expecting a friendly chat and instead finds herself in the firing line of a host who seems determined to provoke her? In just 43 seconds, a simple question about her career would ignite a confrontation so explosive that it would end with security being called and a guest being physically escorted from the studio. This is the story of how Miriam Margolyes, the Oscar-nominated actress known for her warmth, her honesty, and her decades of beloved performances, found herself at the center of a television meltdown that nobody saw coming. And it all started with what should have been the easiest question in the world. Miriam walked onto the Loose Women set that afternoon with her characteristic smile, waving to the audience as they applauded her entrance. She was there to talk about her latest project, a documentary series she had been working on. The panel that day consisted of Denise Welch, who was leading the interview, along with Kay Adams, Nadia Sawalha, and Jane Moore. The atmosphere seemed light, friendly even, as Miriam settled into her seat. Denise opened with what seemed like standard pleasantries. "Miriam, lovely to have you here. You look wonderful." "Thank you, darling," Miriam replied, her voice full of that distinctive warmth that audiences had loved for years. "It's lovely to be here." But then something shifted. Denise leaned forward, and her tone changed ever so slightly. "So, Miriam, you've been quite outspoken lately about various political issues. Some might say you've been using your platform to push your own agenda, rather than just entertaining people. What do you say to those critics?" The audience went quiet. This was not the soft opening question anyone had expected. Miriam's smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. "Well, I think as artists, we have a responsibility to speak about things that matter," Miriam said carefully. "I've never believed in just staying silent when I see injustice." Denise laughed, but it was not a friendly laugh. It had an edge to it. "Right, but some people tune in to watch you act, not to hear your political opinions. Don't you think you're alienating half your audience?" Kay Adams shifted uncomfortably in her seat. You could see her glancing between Denise and Miriam, clearly sensing the tension building. Miriam straightened up a bit. "I don't think being a decent human being should be political, Denise. If people are alienated by kindness and compassion, then perhaps that says more about them than it does about me." "Oh, here we go," Denise said, rolling her eyes dramatically. "The moral superiority routine. You actors always think you know better than everyone else, don't you?" The audience gasped. This was becoming uncomfortable to watch. Nadia Sawalha jumped in, trying to defuse the situation. "I think what's wonderful about Miriam is that she's always been authentic," Nadia said, her voice warm and diplomatic. "She speaks her truth, and I think that's something we should celebrate." But Denise was not backing down. She turned to Nadia with a look that could freeze water. "I'm conducting this interview, Nadia. I don't need you to run interference." Nadia's mouth fell open slightly, clearly shocked by the sharpness of Denise's tone. Jane Moore looked down at her notes, seemingly trying to make herself invisible. Miriam's expression had changed now. The warmth was gone, replaced by something steelier. "I'm sorry. Is there a particular reason you've invited me here today? Because it doesn't seem like you actually want to have a conversation. It seems like you want to have an argument." "I want honesty," Denise shot back. "I'm tired of celebrities coming on this show and getting softball questions. You're a public figure. You put yourself out there. You should be able to handle some real questions." "Real questions?" Miriam repeated, her voice rising slightly. "You've not asked me a single real question. You've made accusations and insinuations. There's a difference, darling." The atmosphere in the studio was electric now. You could feel the tension radiating from the panel. Kay Adams tried again to step in. "Maybe we could talk about Miriam's new documentary," Kay suggested gently. "I think our viewers would love to hear about that." Denise turned to Kay with visible irritation. "Can everyone please let me do my job? This is my segment." "Your segment?" Miriam said, her eyebrows raised. "I was under the impression this was a panel show, Not the Denise Welch hour. Several audience members laughed at this, which only seemed to inflame Denise further. Her face was flushed now, and her voice took on a harder edge. You know what, Miriam? I've had just about enough of your attitude. You come on here acting like you're above it all, like you're some kind of national treasure who can't be questioned. I never said I was above questioning, Miriam replied, her voice remarkably calm considering the circumstances. But I do expect basic respect, something you seem incapable of providing. Denise stood up from her chair. The sudden movement shocked everyone. Basic respect? You've been condescending since the moment you sat down. Looking down your nose at me, at this show, at everything we do here. I have done no such thing, Miriam said, also rising to her feet now. I came here in good faith, prepared to have a pleasant conversation. You're the one who decided to turn this into some kind of confrontation. Nadia stood up as well, placing a hand on Denise's arm. Denise, please. Let's all just take a breath and calm down. Denise shook off Nadia's hand. Don't tell me to calm down. I am calm. I'm just sick of being treated like I'm somehow less than because I didn't go to some fancy drama school. This comment seemed to come out of nowhere, and it hung in the air for a moment. Miriam looked genuinely confused. What on earth are you talking about? Miriam asked. I have never once mentioned drama school or your background or anything of the sort. Where is this coming from? It's coming from your entire demeanor, Denise spat. The way you talk, the way you look at people. You think you're so much better than everyone else. Jane Moore finally spoke up, her voice cautious. Denise, I really think we should take a break. We can all reset and come back to this. But Denise was not listening. She was locked in now, her attention completely focused on Miriam. You people in the arts, you're all the same. You live in your little bubble, completely disconnected from reality, and then you lecture the rest of us about how to live our lives. Miriam's face had gone very still. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. I have worked since I was a child. I grew up without money, without privilege. I have earned everything I have through hard work and dedication. You know nothing about my life, and you have no right to make these assumptions about me. Oh, please, Denise scoffed. You've been dining out on your Harry Potter fame for years. Don't act like you're some struggling artist. The mention of Harry Potter seemed to be the final straw. Miriam's eyes flashed with real anger now. I had a career spanning 5 decades before I ever set foot on a Harry Potter set, Miriam said, her voice shaking slightly. I have worked with some of the greatest directors and actors in the world. I have won awards. I have performed on stages across the globe. And you reduce all of that to one film franchise? Kay Adams stood up now, trying to physically position herself between Denise and Miriam. Ladies, please, this is getting out of hand. But Denise stepped around Kay, moving closer to Miriam. You want to know what I think? I think you're a bitter old woman who can't stand that there are people in this industry who didn't have to go through the traditional route. People who are successful without your precious credentials. The audience was dead silent now. Even the crew members had stopped moving. Everyone was frozen, watching this car crash unfold in real time. Miriam took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was ice cold. I think we're done here. Running away? Denise taunted. Can't handle a little criticism? This isn't criticism, Miriam said, picking up her bag from beside her chair. This is abuse, and I will not sit here and be abused on national television by someone who clearly has her own issues to work through. Denise's face went bright red. How dare you? You don't get to walk off this set. We're in the middle of a live show. Watch me, Miriam said simply, and she started to walk toward the exit. Denise moved quickly, stepping into Miriam's path. You're not going anywhere. You agreed to be here for the full segment. Nadia gasped. Denise, you can't physically block her. But Denise stood her ground, her arms crossed. She's being unprofessional. She needs to sit back down and finish this interview properly. Miriam looked at Denise with something close to pity. The only person being unprofessional here is you. Now please move out of my way. Make me, Denise said, and the challenge in her voice was unmistakable. The studio fell into absolute chaos. Jane Moore was on her feet, frantically gesturing to someone off camera. Kay Adams was pleading with Denise to step aside. Nadia was trying to pull Denise away from Miriam. The audience was murmuring, some people gasping, others looking genuinely frightened by the escalating situation. A producer rushed onto the set, a young man who looked absolutely terrified. Ladies, please. We need to go to a commercial break. Denise ignored him completely, her eyes still locked on Miriam. You think you can just walk out whenever things get difficult? That's not how the real world works. The real world? Miriam repeated, her voice rising now. You know nothing about the real world. You sit here in your comfortable studio, with your comfortable job, and you attack people for entertainment. That's not the real world. That's a circus, and I refuse to be your performing monkey. How dare you speak to me like that? Denise shouted, her face contorted with rage. I have been nothing but professional, and you come on here with your superior attitude and your snide comments. Miriam laughed, but it was a harsh, disbelieving sound. Professional? You call this professional? You've insulted me. You've dismissed my entire career. You've made wild accusations about my character. If this is your idea of professionalism, then I'm genuinely concerned for everyone who has to work with you. More staff members were rushing onto the set now. A security guard appeared from the wings, looking uncertain about what exactly he was supposed to do. Denise turned to the security guard. Escort her out. She's disrupting the show. I'm disrupting the show? Miriam's voice was incredulous now. You're the one who started this entire debacle. You're the one who can't conduct a civil interview. You're the one standing in my way like some sort of schoolyard bully. Kay Adams was near tears now. Please, both of you, this has gone far enough. Denise, step aside. Miriam, I'm so sorry this happened. Denise whirled on Kay. Don't you dare apologize to her. She's the one who needs to apologize. She came on this show and treated all of us like we were beneath her. That's simply not true, Miriam said, her voice tired now. I have been nothing but polite until you decided to attack me for no apparent reason. And now you're trying to rewrite history and make me the villain. Well, I won't have it. Nadia had managed to get between Denise and Miriam now, and she was gently trying to guide Denise back toward the panel desk. Denise, please, you need to let her go. This isn't worth it. But Denise shrugged Nadia off roughly, almost causing Nadia to stumble. Jane Moore rushed over to steady Nadia, looking shocked by Denise's physical aggression. Don't touch me, Denise snapped at Nadia. Then she turned back to Miriam. You want to leave? Fine. I'll leave. But everyone watching will know exactly what kind of person you really are. A coward who can't handle a real conversation. Miriam stood very still for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet, but clear. No, Denise. Everyone watching will see exactly what happened here today. They will see that I came here expecting a professional interview, and instead was subjected to a personal attack by a host who seems to have some deep-seated resentment toward successful women in the arts. They will see that I attempted to remain calm and civil, while you became increasingly hostile and aggressive. And they will see that when I tried to remove myself from an abusive situation, you physically blocked my exit and had to be restrained by your colleagues. The truth of Miriam's words seemed to hit everyone at once. The other panelists looked at Denise with expressions ranging from shock to disappointment. The audience was completely silent, but you could feel their sympathy shifting entirely toward Miriam. Denise seemed to realize she had lost control of the narrative. Her face was still flushed, but now there was something else there too. Uncertainty, perhaps, or the dawning realization of what she had done. I didn't, she started, but her voice trailed off. You did, Miriam said simply. And now I'm going to leave, and you're going to let me. Because if you don't, this situation is going to get even worse for you than it already is. The producer stepped forward again, this time with more authority. Miss Margolyes is right. We need to end this now. Denise, please step aside. For a moment, it looked like Denise might refuse. Her jaw was set, her fists clenched at her sides. But then Jane Moore touched her arm gently and said, "Denise, please, just let her go." Something in Jane's voice seemed to get through. Denise's shoulders slumped slightly, and she took a small step to the side. It was barely enough room, but Miriam took it. She walked past Denise with her head held high, her dignity intact despite everything that had happened. As Miriam reached the edge of the set, she paused and turned back. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment. She looked at each of the panelists in turn, her gaze finally settling on Denise. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for," Miriam said softly. "Because this..." She gestured at the chaos of the set, the uncomfortable faces of the crew, the stunned audience. "This isn't it." And then she was gone, walking off the set and out of the studio, leaving behind a tableau of shock and confusion. Denise stood frozen for a moment, seemingly unsure of what to do next. The other panelists were looking at her with expressions that ranged from sympathy to barely concealed anger. The producer was speaking urgently into his headset, probably trying to figure out how to salvage the rest of the show. Kay Adams was the first to move, walking over to Denise and saying something too quiet for the microphones to pick up. Denise shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. Nadia and Jane exchanged glances, both looking deeply uncomfortable. The security guard, who had been summoned, was still standing awkwardly at the edge of the set, clearly relieved that he had not actually had to physically intervene. The audience remained silent, though you could see people whispering to each other, their faces showing shock and disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Finally, the producer made a cutting motion with his hand, and the cameras stopped rolling. The live broadcast cut to an unscheduled commercial break, leaving viewers across the country wondering what on earth had just happened on their screens. On the set, Denise finally moved, walking back to the panel desk and slumping into her chair. She put her head in her hands, and her shoulders were shaking. Whether from anger, frustration, or the beginning of regret, it was impossible to tell. Kay sat down beside her, speaking in low, soothing tones. Nadia and Jane remained standing, both looking like they wanted to be anywhere else in the world. The audience was being ushered out by staff members, many of them still talking animatedly about what they had witnessed. In the green room, Miriam was gathering her things with the help of a sympathetic production assistant. Her hands were shaking slightly, the adrenaline of the confrontation finally catching up with her, but her face was composed, her dignity unshaken. A senior producer knocked on the door and entered hesitantly. "Miss Margolyes, I cannot apologize enough for what happened out there. That was completely unacceptable, and we take full responsibility." Miriam looked at him with tired eyes. "I appreciate that, but right now I just want to go home." Of course, the producer said quickly. "We have a car waiting for you. And please know that we will be conducting a full review of what happened today." Miriam nodded, picking up her coat. "See that you do. Because no one should have to experience what I just experienced. Not on television, not anywhere." As she left the building, Miriam paused at the exit, taking a deep breath of fresh air. The confrontation was over, but the impact of what had happened would ripple outward in ways that none of them could fully anticipate yet. Back on the set, the remaining panelists were having a hushed but intense conversation. Denise was defending her actions, insisting that Miriam had been condescending from the start. But Kay, Nadia, and Jane were not buying it. They had all seen what happened. They had all witnessed Denise's escalating hostility, her refusal to let things go, her physical blocking of Miriam's exit. "You crossed a line," Jane said quietly but firmly. "Multiple lines, actually," She was being impossible, Denise insisted, but her voice lacked conviction now. No, Nadia said, shaking her head. She was being professional in the face of your hostility. There's a difference. The commercial break was ending soon. They would have to go back on air and somehow finish the show. But the chemistry of the panel had been shattered. The easy camaraderie that usually characterized Loose Women had been replaced by tension and barely concealed conflict. When they did return to air, it was Kay who addressed the camera, her face serious. We apologize for the disruption to today's show. Sometimes conversations become heated, and we regret that our guest felt unable to continue. We'll be right back after these messages. It was a carefully worded statement, diplomatically phrased to avoid placing blame while acknowledging that something had gone wrong. But anyone who had watched the confrontation unfold knew exactly where the fault lay. The rest of the show limped along, with the panelists discussing lighter topics and taking calls from viewers. But the energy was wrong. The spontaneity and warmth that made Loose Women popular was gone, replaced by a stiff formality that felt alien and uncomfortable. Denise participated in the remaining segments, but she was subdued now, her earlier fire extinguished. She made no reference to what had happened with Miriam, and neither did the other panelists. It was as if they had all agreed to pretend that the explosive confrontation had never occurred. But of course, it had occurred. And in the age of social media and instant replays, there was no pretending otherwise. The confrontation had been broadcast live to hundreds of thousands of viewers, and already clips were being shared online, dissected, and analyzed by people across the country. In the immediate aftermath, sitting in the car taking her home, Miriam felt the full weight of what had happened settling over her. She had been in this industry for decades. She had faced difficult interviews, hostile journalists, aggressive questioning, but nothing quite like this. Nothing so personal, so vitriolic, so utterly uncalled for. She thought about Denise's words, the accusations of superiority and condescension. She replayed the conversation in her mind, trying to pinpoint where things had gone wrong. Had she said something to provoke such a reaction? Had there been some slight, some perceived insult that she had missed? But no matter how many times she went over it, she could not find the trigger. From the moment she had sat down, Denise had been antagonistic. The hostility had been there from the start, simmering just below the surface before boiling over entirely. Miriam wondered about Denise's comment about drama school, about traditional routes into the industry. Was that what this was really about? Some kind of resentment toward people who had come up through formal training? It seemed like such a strange thing to fixate on, especially on a show like Loose Women, where diversity of background and experience was supposed to be celebrated. Or perhaps it was something else entirely. Perhaps Denise was dealing with personal issues that had nothing to do with Miriam at all. Perhaps Miriam had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, a convenient target for frustrations that had been building for reasons she could not possibly know. But regardless of the why, the fact remained that it had happened. On live television, in front of a studio audience, and countless viewers at home, Miriam had been attacked, insulted, and when she tried to leave, physically blocked. It was humiliating and infuriating in equal measure. Back at the studio, as the show finally ended and the cameras stopped rolling for the last time that day, the panel sat in heavy silence. The studio audience had long since left. The crew was packing up equipment, and the four women who remained on the set were each lost in their own thoughts. And Kay was the first to speak. That was awful. No one disagreed. Even Denise, who had been so fired up during the confrontation, seemed deflated now. She sat with her shoulders hunched, staring at her hands. "I don't know what happened," Denise said quietly. "I don't know why I got so angry." Nadia looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and frustration. "Denise, you have to understand how that looked, how it felt for Miriam. You went after her from the moment she sat down. I was just trying to ask real questions. Denise protested weakly. No, Jane said firmly. You were trying to provoke her. There's a difference between tough questions and personal attacks, and you crossed that line spectacularly. Denise's eyes filled with tears, but whether they were tears of regret, frustration, or self-pity, it was hard to say. I've ruined everything, haven't I? The other women did not rush to reassure her. They could not. What had happened was too serious, too public, too damaging. You need to make this right somehow, Kay said eventually. I don't know how, but you need to try. Denise nodded, wiping at her eyes. I know. I will. I just need to figure out how. But as they all knew, some things could not be easily fixed. Some moments, once they happened, could not be taken back or smoothed over with apologies and explanations. This was one of those moments. The confrontation between Denise Welch and Miriam Margolyes on Loose Women had lasted less than 15 minutes from start to finish. But in that short span of time, reputations had been damaged, relationships had been fractured, and a line had been crossed that would be very difficult to uncross. For Miriam, sitting in her quiet home that evening, the events of the day felt surreal. She had gone to the studio expecting a pleasant chat about her work, and had instead found herself in a situation that felt more like an ambush. She felt violated, disrespected, and deeply tired. But she also felt something else. A quiet certainty that she had done the right thing by walking away. She had maintained her dignity. She had refused to engage with the hostility and abuse. She had stood up for herself without stooping to Denise's level. And perhaps most importantly, she had made it clear that she would not be bullied or intimidated. Not even on live television. Not even by someone who was supposed to be facilitating a friendly conversation. There were limits to what she would tolerate, and Denise had blown past those limits with remarkable speed. As the evening news programs began picking up the story, as social media exploded with commentary and outrage, as the clips from the show were played and replayed endlessly, one thing became very clear. The audience had seen exactly what happened. They had watched Miriam try to remain calm and professional in the face of escalating hostility. They had seen Denise become increasingly aggressive and unreasonable. They had witnessed the moment when words turned to physical confrontation, when Denise had blocked Miriam's exit like some kind of power play. And overwhelmingly, the public reaction was one of shock and sympathy. Shock that such a thing could happen on a daytime talk show. Sympathy for Miriam, who had handled an impossible situation with as much grace as anyone could reasonably expect. For Denise, the reaction was far less kind. Questions were being asked about her professionalism, her temperament, her fitness to host a live television program. The incident was being analyzed from every angle, and in almost every analysis, Denise came out looking bad. But in those immediate hours after the confrontation, as the sun set on one of the most dramatic days in Loose Women's history, the full implications of what had happened were still unfolding. The story was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning.